Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Jim Coleman. Jim is the CEO of Erlanger Health System in Chattanooga. Jim started as a respiratory therapist and moved into hospital administration. He led Erlanger Health System from being a public hospital to now a private one. Jim, before we take a deeper look at your career as a soda jerk at King Munchie, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
It's always coffee.
Black and caffeinated?
Black and caffeinated. My father was a truck driver, and he would let me have nothing else growing up.
Well, and
it stuck.
That's back when coffee was coffee. Yeah. I mean, particularly a truck driver's coffee.
Yeah.
Because I grew up around mechanics, and their coffee was unlike any other coffee.
Strong.
Yeah, strong.
And hot.
Get your day going. So what does your morning consist of? You get up early and have coffee at home, or do you?
I'm very much a morning person.
Yeah.
I usually get up 5:30 to 6 and just go in. First thing I do, make coffee, do a little bit of exercise and stretching in the morning, and then read the local newspaper, and then read the Wall Street Journal, and then read the Tennessean.
Yeah.
And just sort of go through those three. It's pretty easy now with digital.
Yeah.
Makes that really easy and sort of get a touch of what's going on, and then get ready and head into work, usually by 7:38.
You continue drinking coffee at work?
Yes, until at least noon.
Till noon?
Yeah.
What do you switch over to?
Then I just switch over to water.
Yeah.
And sort of keep it going that way.
Well, and we're going to get to work, what work is today, and how you could probably drink coffee until midnight and still not get done what you probably got on your plate. But I want to start at the beginning, where we always start. You grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Was born and raised in Cleveland. Funny story to that was during that time, my father was at Fort Hood in Texas. He was military police. And my mom got pregnant there, so I was bred in Texas. But then when it was time for me to be born, he had her sister drive all the way from Cleveland to Lampasas, Texas, to pick my mom up so I'd be born in Bradley County.
Really?
Yeah.
And he didn't want you born in Texas?
Didn't want me born in Texas.
Oh, I like your dad.
So I was born in Tennessee, and then about a month later, took me back, and I still had my first few years in Texas.
Well, you know what? My oldest daughter just got married and lives in Austin, Texas, because her husband's from Houston, and they live in Austin. He went to school at University of Texas. If we ever have grandchildren, I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to drive down and get her, and that kid's going to be a Tennessean.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah, and you should be. I like that. So after you were born, you went back to Texas, and then how'd you end up in Cleveland? Did your dad just went to get home?
Dad was from Cleveland. Yeah, he came back to Cleveland after he was discharged. His father was a truck driver at Brown Stove Works. At that time, I think it was Dixie Stove or something like that.
So this is your grandfather?
And my grandfather. And so he just started driving with his father, and that's how it started. And he ended up being at Brown Stove Works in Cleveland for 42 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, until from the time he came back to the time he retired.
Is Brown Stove still open?
It still is, I believe so.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. They've taken a little different direction in their manufacturing, but at the time when Dad was there, they did a lot of stoves for RVs.
Yeah.
Did a lot of the gas stoves for RVs. So we did a lot of trips to up in Illinois. There were a place up there that was manufacturing mecca for RVs, Elkhart, Indiana. And then Elkhart, Indiana was another big place.
Do you have siblings?
Nope. So only child.
Only child, and you're doing a lot of family trips like up to Elkhart, but you said hunting and camping and fishing was a big part of your growing up.
It really was. And so my dad was gone a lot, so I was much more of a mama's boy. And so I spent so much time with her. But every weekend, he was usually home by Fridays. And so every Friday we would pack up especially in the summer and spring and a little bit into the fall. And we'd head off someplace and camp for the weekend. And then usually, not all the time, we would take some family vacations and go on some trips, longer trips. But a lot of times we'd just stay and go up to Chilhowee Mountain in Polk County, Tennessee, and spend the week camping.
Well, it's all right out your back door, and people are coming from all across the country to enjoy it, and you had it right here.
I know. When you grow up there, you appreciate it.
Yeah.
But then when in my last job before Erlanger, I traveled a lot all over the Southeast, and I just realized how blessed I was to live in this area and always be able to stay here.
I grew up in Memphis, and actually my wife grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee. And when we go to Memphis now, you really miss the mountains. And when we're driving back on Highway 72 and you go through Huntsville and you're coming into where you start to feel like you're at home, there is that feeling of, we take this for granted.
I had another feeling whenever would be coming home from a trip, whether it was flying back in or driving.
Yeah.
I had the same feeling, whichever direction I was coming from. When I started seeing the mountains, it felt like home.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about growing up. You said your dad, obviously a truck driver, was on the road a lot. Was he all over the country, the Southeast?
He was initially, when I was young, he had a partner, and they did a lot of long trips. And he would go out as far as New Mexico.
Wow.
And across country. They did a lot of trips that were long. He got to be a more senior position as far as a senior driver. Then he started taking mostly local, mostly in the Southeast trips, Georgia, Alabama, up in the Midwest, usually gone no more than a couple of days.
Oh, well, that's good. And your mom worked also, right?
My mom worked. She was a seamstress most of her career. She would work off and on. She didn't work full-time the whole time, but she was off and on. And she worked at Hardwick Clothes the longest. And so when I was in high school, that was the period she was working there. And so I was the best dressed. I had a blazer of every color when she worked there. So, but she loved it and loved doing it. And I think she did it for the extra money. And she just, and she developed a lot of friends there. Even some of her, I guess it would have been her cousin her cousin worked there. And so she had a lot of friends there.
Well, and you mentioned you were best dressed, but that had to have some effect on you in later years of life and how you dressed and what you thought was appropriate and stylish.
Yeah, it did. It sort of stuck with me. And then a few years back when Alan Jones in Cleveland purchased Hardwick, because it's at the time until it closed, it was the oldest clothing manufacturer in the United States. It was in consistent, operation. And I went over and I've actually got it out in my car. My blazer I'm wearing today is made it for Hardwick Stove. It's one of the blazers that he made when he had it during that tenure. I went up there and made a special trip just to buy one so I'd have one for memories.
And Hardwick's still going, and Alan just sold it, or
they sold it, and then I think it's now officially closed down.
Oh, is it? Well, that's too bad.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, that is. Talk about growing up in Bradley County. You're the only child, and both your parents are working. So what was that like?
It was just it was a great growing up. Lived in a little small neighborhood, sort of in South Bradley County, off of Dalton Pike, the road that goes highway goes to Dalton, and a lot of farmland. And so had 2 or 3 good friends that developed over the year, and it was totally different back then than it is now.
Cleveland's blown up.
And it's blown up. So it was much, much smaller town. And in the summer, me and my buddies, when we were out of school, we didn't even stay inside. We were outside continuously. We would even set, the dining canopies that you put over a picnic table. Mm-hmm. We would get one of those, sit in the backyard, in my backyard, because we were sort of up on a hill with a nice view. And we'd take the bottom sections out and have it down low. And we would sleep out in the summer, all summer long, just sleep out on the canopy when the weather was good. Yeah. And so it was just a great place to grow up. My mom and dad were great parents. They loved each other, worked hard, and I picked up those lessons along the way.
Was hunting and camping and fishing a big part of what you were doing with your buddies?
A little bit of that with my buddies, but then my dad loved to do that.
Did he?
So that was when I got my dad time, was during the hunting and the fishing. So that's when I really got to spend a lot of time with him. And then as he got more senior in his job, and at the time when I was starting high school and starting to be able to do things like that, especially the hunting part. So he was home more in the weekends, and so we'd plan hunting trips and fishing trips. And they actually had a cabin back past North River in Tellico. They had a cabin up there, so we'd go up there later in the years and spend time at the cabin, and we'd go trout fishing every weekend.
Is that still big for you today to hunt and fish?
It still is, yeah.
What do you like to hunt?
Mostly now. Used to, me and my dad would boar hunt most of the time. Wow. So we would boar hunt.
That's pretty rough, isn't it?
It was, yeah. It's scary, but it's fun. It's fun to do. Yeah, but probably I've evolved to more shotgun sports and things like that. And it's mostly quail, upland game, things like that, and then trout fishing.
So growing up, you're outdoors all the time. Playing any sports or anything?
I was on the Bradley Central's very first wrestling team.
Very first,
and we were horrible. so we had Coach White. Still remember Coach White, and then Coach Frazier, Jerry Frazier, and they were football coaches who said, "Okay, we'll coach the team." They knew nothing about wrestling, and so therefore we knew nothing about wrestling. But we were in really good shape.
Yeah.
So the first year we lost a lot, and then the second year we got a little bit better. And then it didn't start. I was a junior when they started the team. I was junior and senior year. But Alan, I never will forget. Alan Jones is a big wrestling supporter. And I think he was actually state champion at one point in time in his life. And he was a couple of years ahead of me, but he came to the first Bradley Cleveland match. And big rivalry. And the TSSAA referee never showed up. And there's a crowd, and the auditorium was full. And so he was there to watch it. And so the referee never showed up. So they ended up putting him in a referee's suit, and he refereed our first and he's
a big Bradley guy, isn't he?
No, he's a big Cleveland guy.
Oh, I thought he was a Bradley guy
he's
for some
huge.
reason.
He's huge Cleveland.
Okay. Well, that wasn't very fair to you guys.
It wasn't. But he every time I see him, still to this day, he reminds me of that time. And he said, I just slapped the mat a lot, and that's all he remembers.
So the wrestling what I found interesting in what you said was the football coaches.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they just took the football team and said, this is a way we're going to keep you guys in shape.
It probably was.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was a different sport. I mean, it's a team sport, but a one-on-one sport too. And but it was a lot of fun. Well, it would have been more fun if I'd been better at it.
Yeah. But to your point on it is a team sport, but it's your individual performance counts so much as opposed to being on a football team or a baseball team.
Yeah.
Because you're out there by yourself in the match, right?
Yeah. And it's sort of I was probably the oddball because a lot of the guys played other sports. And then the other extracurricular I did was in band. So I was in the marching band and
What'd you play?
Baritone and trombone.
Still play today?
No. I sort of dropped it after college.
You mentioned wrestling was your only sport. What caused you to go out for wrestling if you weren't that into other sports?
It's sort of a weird story back. A lot of people will remember this. We had local wrestling, the more entertaining wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Of
Saturday morning TV wrestling.
Saturday morning. My grandfather loved it, and so we watched it every Saturday. And so he just got into it, and then I knew it was his Greco-Roman wrestling. It was totally different, but that's sort of what lured me into it, just to try it and see if I liked it. And it was fun.
Yeah,
it was a big challenge, and they recruited a really good wrestling coach. I can't remember his name now. I think it was Jackson, but Turner Jackson, and he really Bradley's a team to be dealt with now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, wrestling's huge in this area.
Yeah, it really is.
Because I moved from West Tennessee, and wrestling was big, but not like it is here.
Yeah.
And to your point on the Saturday morning wrestling, growing up in Memphis, I mean, I grew up with that. And, all all the villains, the Tojo Yamamoto's, the
Jackie Fargo.
Jackie Fargo and the Fargo Strut. Right? I mean, you can't beat that.
Yeah, they were good. Yeah, they were great, and they would come to Cleveland and do little matches on Fridays sometime. And my uncle would always take me to get those. So it was just fun growing up. It was always something to be entertained.
Oh yeah. Now, did you work through high school?
Yeah, worked. Probably my first real job was my uncle had a few restaurants in Cleveland, and he had one on Dalton Pike down close to toward where I lived, and it was called King Munchie. And
Munchie.
Yeah, it was basically.
I like that name.
Yeah, it was a good name, but it was basically a drive-in where the cars drove in, and you had car hops that went out and took the orders, and then brought the orders back in, and I'd do the drink orders and everything like that. So I was just sort of a soda jerk, but I did that, and my uncle was the cook, and I knew him, and so it was a fun job, and just did that. And then that was early, like freshman, sophomore years, just for part-time jobs in the summer. And then when I got more serious about being of age for a car and wanting to drive, my dad made a deal with me if I'd work at Brown Stove Works, he'd get me a job there. And if I would save a certain amount of money, then he'd help me get a car. And so I worked at Brown Stove Works on the assembly line for one long hot summer and saved enough money and got a car. And then the last year, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was a big department store. It wasn't Rose's. It was W.T. Grant. That's what the name just came to me. W.T. Grant had a department store in Cleveland. And before I went to Cleveland State, I actually worked there that summer before I started college.
So your dad got you a job working summers on the assembly line. I imagine it was probably pretty hot and tedious work.
It was hot, but I made 10 cents an hour more because I had the luxurious job of when they put the stove on the assembly line, I got to put the insulation around it and put a few screws in. And so I got extra money for that.
What did a job like that teach you in terms of?
It was fun. But it taught me that I did not want to do this the rest of my life. That was the biggest thing it taught me.
It's a good lesson there. But you had a purpose for the job because you were saving for a car.
Yeah.
What kind of car?
I got a 1968 Cougar XR7.
You wish you had it today?
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be worth a lot more than I paid for it if I had it today.
Yeah, Cougar XR7, 1968. That's a classic at this point.
It is. It was a really nice car. It was I found this out later, but the guy that was the dispatcher who coordinated all the logistics for the trucks going out, and it was his car, and he was getting ready to buy a new one, and Dad had already cut a deal because he wanted it because it was in really great shape, and the guy took care of it. So that was it was a nice surprise because I just knew I wanted a car, but Dad already had picked.
Yeah, it picked out.
Yeah,
but what a good thing because what he did was not only gave you helped you get the job, but the whole opportunity of saving the money and having that, I'm sure was intentional on his part.
And Brown Stove Works has a really neat place in my life because that's probably one of the milestones where I was working on the assembly line and I picked up on things pretty well. So they ended up moving me on every job on the assembly line over the first couple of weeks, and I could do every job. I can still take a stove apart, So
yeah, I bet.
You just learn everything about putting a stove together and take it. And then I thought, what are they doing? I'd get really good at one job and then they'd move me to something else and I have to learn another one. But anyway, before halfway through the summer, then they moved me to the quality line where my job was to, when they went through inspection, if it had a chip on a panel or something, a burner didn't work, then I would take it apart, fix that, and run it back through quality again. So it was really nice because I got off the line, but was able to fix stoves and do it at my own pace.
Yeah, that had to be nicer to do it at your own pace rather than something coming flying at you.
But while I was working on the line, I got a piece of metal because you didn't have safety goggles and things back in that day.
Yeah, different time.
And a different time period. And so I was down waiting to be taken locally to just get a little piece of metal out of my eye. And the HR guy said, "Hey, you have good grades?" And I went, "Yes, sir." And he said, we have a scholarship for Cleveland State. And I went, "No, sir." And he said, "If you got good grades, you ought to apply for it." And so he gave me the paperwork and I went home and applied for it. And anyway, my scholarship to Cleveland State was paid for by Brown Stove Works.
Was your intention before this opportunity for the scholarship? Had you intended to go to college, or?
I did, and it's the small town thing got
Yeah.
me. I was nominated to go to West Point, and
I didn't know that.
I got cold feet. I was in ROTC the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
and me and a good friend of mine, Philip Donahue, we were what they call a Blue Star unit, which meant that we were in the highest 10% of ROTC organizations across the country, and you automatically got 2 nominations to West Point and had to go through the Congress. And so they selected me and Philip, and at the last minute, I got cold feet, didn't want to leave Cleveland, and backed out. And he went, and I ran into him 20 years later, and he's not that now, but he had come back to this area and was a quality control engineer at Shaw Industries. And I ran into him boating one day, just by accident. So interesting.
Well, you had to have good grades to get nominated to go to West Point.
Yeah, I always did well in school.
Yeah.
Yes, I always put into it. That didn't just come naturally, but I put work into it and really tried to do well.
I want to ask this in the right way, and I think the best way to ask is just to ask you, was there ever any regret not taking advantage of the
West Point? Yeah, during periods of my life, I thought, wonder what would it have been like if I'd went to West Point.
Because your life probably be different.
It would probably be totally different.
Yeah.
But I think, never, could never plan what's happened in my career.
Right.
But I've been very happy with it. I've always been doing things that I like doing.
Well, and as we talked about a little bit earlier, just because a door closes doesn't mean another one's not opening, and there's other opportunities there. So you decide to go to Cleveland State partly because of the scholarship through Brownstow. Did you know what you wanted to study?
I knew if I went to West Point that I wanted to finish up there and get into some kind of medical training.
Okay.
And wanted to be, initially I had in my head, wanted to be a radiologist.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, when I went to Cleveland State, I thought, started looking around at all the different allied health things they had and picked respiratory. It seemed interesting to me. And then there was, at that time, respiratory therapist now is a good mixture of men and women.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, for some weird reason, it was mostly guys. And so I knew some of the guys, and so that sort of lured me into, and sort of not randomly, but picked that one as something I was really interested in and went that direction.
And so that's the Cleveland State portion of it. You get out with, is it associate's degree?
Yeah. So I had associate's degree, ended up coming out, and you do your clinical rotations at Erlanger.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I was introduced to Erlanger and spent a year there doing clinical rotations and classes. And then when I graduated, I was working part-time there anyway, and just stayed because I really liked Erlanger and what they did and how they served the community. And it was an interesting place to work.
Yeah.
Because you see things there you don't see anyplace else around the region because of the nature of the trauma center.
It's a top trauma center for the region, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the only one, for 50,000 square mile radius. So it's a
wow. I didn't realize that.
You go to the only other ones in the state are Knoxville and Nashville and Memphis and us.
So Cleveland State, you're working at Erlanger, and then you go to UTC.
So then that was a long story. I still wanted to maybe go into the medical school. So I started getting my bachelor's in Bachelor of Science in Chemistry. And so I went all the way through working and going to school part-time. And I was a semester away from having my degree in chemistry. And working in the hospital, I realized I don't really think I like the doctor's lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm really not sure that's for me. And right at the end, I switched and went into more of a business course.
What a great practical experience to be able to be around that and say, I don't know if I can do this the rest of my life.
Yeah. When I looked at it, I thought, I don't know if I want to, I don't know that really suits what I like to do as a lifestyle. Because those ladies and gentlemen that do that are committed to it. It's a hard job. You have to be really committed and they are, and but it's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, some professions more than others, but overall, if you're the things that I wanted to go into, it required call coverages and responsibilities and all those kind of things. And I thought, it's really not. I don't think that's really what I want to do.
You got to be all in.
You got to. Yeah, it's not a. I think about this. You got to be totally committed to it.
Well, and you're going to school, you're working, and you're on a pretty tough track. I mean, just that in itself is a lot of work or time.
It was, and so, but I just stuck to it and took the most load I could take to get caught up, and then finish my bachelor's degree in allied health management.
Mm-hmm.
Took about a year break or so, and then started back to get an MBA in finance.
Back at UTC?
Yeah, back at UTC.
Why did you pick finance?
At that time, I'd switched over from being the director of respiratory into more of an administrative role, starting the quality program up at Erlanger. That was when quality was just it was a new thing coming into, CQI, they call it continuous quality improvement. That was a new thing that Jim Pickle was the president at the time of the hospital. And he had noticed I had been doing using some of those things in my department and respiratory and some of the other departments I had. And he called me and said he'd been to a conference, said this was coming, and we had no choice, but we needed to understand it and get into it. And he asked me to take that role to start up the first quality department at Erlanger.
Were you doing those things on your own, just how you felt things needed to be done, or was it something you were exposed to?
It was sort of things I was picking up in the MBA program, and I would just play around with them in the department to see if we could improve some of the things we did.
And you mentioned that you were the respiratory director at that time. So you got out of Cleveland State and go to work at Erlanger, and you're working. But as you're going to school at UTC, you're promoted to respiratory director.
Yeah, I was. I went from a respiratory therapist to a supervisor, then assistant director, and then director of the department, and then the director of the department, and some more ancillary departments. I had GI lab, electro, had not EKG, but ECG, had the neurodiagnostics lab, had a few other labs under my responsibility.
You got to be a pretty young guy at this time.
I was, because I went straight out of high school into college. And so probably I started there full time in 80, and probably by 87, I was the director.
That's pretty quick and a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, we had, at that time, it was a lot to me. It was probably about 300 folks that were, that I was responsible for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was.
You're not even 30 yet.
Yeah. Probably right around that ballpark.
You're in a pretty good position at Erlanger at that point.
Yeah.
How long are you there?
I was there till 2000.
From 80 to 2000?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then where's life take you?
So I sort of got, Erlanger had always been at that period of time a rotating door of CEOs, and we just never could seem to get traction. And so I just thought, at that time when I left Erlanger, I was the vice president of decision and just planning and decision support. And so I just thought, I probably just need to try something different, because I didn't see a path at Erlanger at that time to go forward. And so I left and did consulting for just about a year, maybe 2 years, and worked with the local group. Actually, some of the guys were in this building at the incubator during that period of time. And as a result of the consulting job, I was doing a project for Hutchinson Medical Center, and when it was still there in North Georgia. And I did the project to put the surgery center, cancer center, and medical office building there on Battlefield Parkway. That was what I was working on. And when I finished that, the CEO was Ralph Nip, Dr. Nip at the time, and I'd known him from Erlanger, as cardiothoracic surgeon, and he offered me a job as chief operating officer to come in and implement the plan that we'd come up with. And so that's how I sort of left Erlanger and then ended up back. I missed being in a hospital, so the consulting, I just wasn't fulfilling or satisfying to me, and got back into the hospital operations from there. And then from that job, I'd worked on some other contacts I'd worked on during my consulting time, the gentleman that was at Cleveland Community Hospital. I'd done a project with them, and he called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to get promotion and going to Pennsylvania in our company," and asked if I would be interested in applying for the CEO job there since I was from Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said sure and interviewed and got the job. So that was my first CEO job, was in my hometown at Cleveland.
It's two things I find interesting. One is that you go to school to be a respiratory therapist, but all of a sudden you're on the administrative side. Was that something you saw yourself doing early on, or just where you saw the opportunities?
I saw the opportunities, and I really enjoyed it, and was pretty decent at it.
Yeah.
Managing people, managing a hospital. One of my mentors told me is like being you have to be know what you're doing, number one, but you have to also be part psychologist and counselor and NBA referee. Because you're always dealing with something, and so relationship skills are a big piece of it. You got to know what you're doing. But there was a book I read when I was at Erlanger back years ago, and I remember one part of it says you have to have data and good relationships to make anything happen, and that's really true. And my whole career, I found that to be true. If you have great information and you don't have the ability to convince people this is the way to go, or it'll get them to lean that way, you can't get anything done. If you have great relationship skills and you got bad data, data that you're working off of, or bad information, you're not going to really get anywhere anyway. And so I've always remembered that and tried to practice that. But I always saw the opportunity, and that door, unbeknownst to me, through my relationship, doing a good job on that consulting project, and then knowing Dr. Knipp and him having confidence in me, it's just one of those, that door opened, and that really, really got me on my executive administrative track.
Well, and that was the second thing I wanted to bring up, was the consulting, is that when a lot of people hear consultant, they don't necessarily think that it can lead to other things back into the industry.
Yeah.
But what it does, it keeps you exposed
to lots of things.
To people and opportunities.
Yeah. And the second job was a result of that same, relationship that had been built on a project. And it was, it really does open doors up and exposes you to lots of different people, because Hutchinson was a not-for-profit, and then Cleveland Community was a for-profit. And so that was a whole new venue, which really was good. And so I was there when we bought Bradley Memorial. Mm-hmm. So I was the first CEO at Bradley when we bought that and combined those two hospitals.
What was the difference for you between the not-for-profit and then the profit-based hospital? How did they operate differently, or is it really just?
They do operate differently. Not-for-profits tend to be a lot less sophisticated in their operation metrics and what they look for. They know the targets they want to achieve in just about every category, and not-for-profits not always are able to do that. And it's really driven by being for-profit. You have shareholders, and you have to perform well to keep the shareholders happy. And so it's a different. So that particular venue there was worked out well for me, but then I really missed Chattanooga and the bigger facilities, and so I started talking with Park Ridge, and then jumped from CHS, which is for profit that owned Cleveland, to HCA, which is the granddaddy of all for profits. And I was there for about 10 years.
I think that's where I first met you, was at Park Ridge.
And it was just, and that was I worked with Daryl Moore, probably the best. He wasn't probably the best boss I ever worked for. He was just a super guy. Yeah, we clicked, and we just had a good run together for that whole length of time. And I actually went there as business development initially, and then he moved me into the chief operating officer role for the market about a year and a half or so after I started, and the rest of the time was as chief operating officer.
And how long were you at Park Ridge? 10 years, you said?
Right around 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, and just walk through where all that takes you, because I also know you had a health concern at some point in there too, didn't you?
Yeah, well, that was after Park Ridge.
Was it?
Yeah, right after Park Ridge. So Park Ridge, I'd been there 10 years, and if you're with HCA and you want to move up to bigger and better jobs, you got to move.
Right.
And so you've already heard my story. I really like where I live.
Yes.
And so I saw a job come across email, so headhunters, and it just said, hey, it was a senior vice president, or just as a vice president of hospital operations for a company based in Texas, in Plano, Texas. But it was for all the Southeast, and they had about a dozen, 12 or 15 hospitals Southeast that they managed. And I would be over those. And I thought, that sounds sort of interesting and be something different to do. And I like smaller communities, and it sounds fun. So I talked to my wife about it, and she said, yeah, you're sort of like stuck. It's just you're in everything's sort of rote in your job. You're going to do the same thing every day. And maybe it's time for a change. And so it's sort of frightening, a little anxiety, but because you're in a really good position and you're doing what you do and you do it well, but to step out and do something totally different. So she
took a chance.
She encouraged me, and she helped me with that decision. I interviewed, and then had one follow-up interview that I was in the final running. And then I'll tell you the reason for telling you this part in a minute, but I was in Apalachicola on vacation, and when I got the phone call that I got the job, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So then anyway, I got that job. And then the reason I say that is so I went through all the iterations. And then when I left that job several years later and was on the board at Erlanger, my last day on that job was at Apalachicola. And before I started on the board.
That seems to be your magic place.
It was. It's sort of a magic place. It's an interesting story. There's all these little things that happen, but I really enjoyed that part of that. I got to stay in Chattanooga. I worked out of Chattanooga. I went to Plano once a month for corporate meetings at the first week of each month.
So you didn't have to move to Texas? Because I was going to ask you what your dad would think about him taking the time to get you born in Tennessee and then you going back to Texas.
Yeah, so that was the great thing about it. They wanted someone sort of based in the area. And so I was actually perfectly based in the area from Chattanooga. Had a few hospitals in Kentucky, but most of them were in eastern Georgia and down, and I had a few over in southeast Georgia, so southwest Georgia. And so it was good. And then when I left there, I went to Alliant, which when I left that job, went to Alliant, was the same kind of company, but I went in as the CEO. And so we had hospitals there in the Midwest, Illinois, Kentucky, didn't have anything in Tennessee, but a lot, and a bunch of hospitals in the Panhandle of Florida and Lower Alabama, L.A.
LA, yep. I'm from L.A., Lower Alabama. At what point did you have your heart attack?
Okay, so I'd been with the Plano company about maybe just a year and a half, and somewhere right in that ballpark. And it was December 15th of 2015, and I was at home on a Sunday, and I like to letter the Christmas envelope. So that was on my agenda for that day. I was going to address all of our Christmas envelopes for that year. And we had a big black lab, Penny, and Penny was struggling. She was 16 years old at that time. And so it helped her outside to go to the restroom. And I was just standing there, and she sort of fell over. She was having trouble with her hips, and I helped her back up. And then I felt something in my chest when I stood up. And I thought, it hurts pretty bad. And I took a deep breath, and it got more intense.
Did you know right away?
And so I really did. I said, okay, this is not normal. And so, but I'm usually a fairly calm person in most instances. So I walked over. Amy, my wife, was on the porch, and I walked over, and she says I didn't, but I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. Call 911. And I went in and got a bunch of aspirin and chewed a bunch of aspirin up. And she came back in, and I said, did you call 911? She said, you're serious? I went, yeah, I'm serious. I'm having a heart attack. And so long story short, fire department responded, first responders, then the ambulance called. They loaded me up, and they were giving me nitroglycerin, and it would give relief, and then it would come back. And they were just driving me, no lights and sirens, just driving me I said go to Park Ridge because I just lived there not long ago, knew everybody there, knew the docs there and knew all the people. And so they took me there and was going all the way to the ER. And I remember looking at the first EKG strip, and I could read them. I guess they didn't know that, and I looked at it and went, okay, I got ST segment. It's really high. I'm having a heart attack, which I sort of knew already. And then they ran another strip, but they ripped it off before I could see it. And then they came back and said, don't want to cause any alarm, but we're going to go lights and sirens the rest of the way in.
Oh, wow.
I went, okay.
No, that won't cause any alarm, will it?
So anyway, so then I laid back and we took off and said my prayers. And the last thing I remember was I remember that I had the same path I had taken to work for 10 years. And I remember seeing a drugstore sign, and I went, oh, good, close to the hospital. And then next thing I know, it's like I went to sleep. Next thing I know, I woke up, and one of the nurses I knew from the hospital was on top of me. And we were looking eye to eye. And I opened my eyes and I said, Katrina? She said, Jim? And
She's doing CPR?
Yeah. She said, Jim, I'm sorry. I think I broke some of your ribs. And I went, broke my ribs? And I looked down and I've got defibrillation pads.
Oh, my goodness.
She'd been doing CPR. And I went, this isn't good. And so then of course, as soon as you wake up, they cut your clothes off and they take you to cath lab. And it got a couple stents, and they checked everything out and, recovered in a couple of days and went home and went through rehab, and knock on wood, everything's been good since then.
What does that do to you mentally? Because you're not necessarily on a fast track, but you're progressing your career along. You're doing all these things. What does that say to you, or how do you take that?
It was a eye-opening experience. It really makes you appreciate each day, a lot more. And I think the biggest thing, I used to be, and I'm not as bad as I used to be though. I used to be just an obsessive planner. I just had to plan every day out what I was going to do. I still do that, but nowhere to the level that I did before, because I realized that you're really not in charge of anything.
Right.
You just think you are. So you just come in and do the best you can and manage things and do a good job. But don't try to think you have to control everything in your life.
That's a hard thing to give up.
It's hard to give up, but it's really made me, I think I'm a better leader as a result of that. And I think it's really been, it was of course a life-changing thing, but I think in a really good way for me.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is a John Lennon quote that says, "Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans."
Yeah.
And
exactly.
as a planner, you can't get out of the way of life, can you, Jim?
Exactly. And then from that is probably my favorite Bible verse from that. I think it's in Luke, and it talks about, Jesus said, if you can't add an hour to your life by worrying, why do you worry about everything else?
What a great point.
And I thought that just really sort of hit me. I thought, yeah, that's exactly right. If you can't do anything, and he says, if you can't do something that simple, why do you worry about everything else? Because tomorrow has enough worries of its own. So it really changes, take things day by day and not try to look out in the future too far, and just sort of stay in the moment, more stay in the present. I think it's probably the biggest change it's made for me.
And you said you felt that made you a better leader.
Yeah, I think so. I really think it did, because from that point in time, I finished my career there with CHC, and then went to Alliant. Mm-hmm. And then when I was at Alliant, guess where I was at when Senator Watson called to ask if I'd be on the board at Erlanger.
Probably Apalachicola.
I was in Apalachicola, Florida. And so I was on the front porch of a little hotel they have there, and I was getting ready to go to the hospital, and he called, and I called my wife and said, what do you think? She said, well, you started there. It really gave you your start of your career, and it'd be good to give back. And I thought, that's sort of what I was thinking. So called him back the next day and told him I would do it. And I never thought I would end up being the CEO of Erlanger. Not in my wildest dreams, even when I worked there. That was not what I aspired to do. It ended up happening. And it's been, I have to say, the board experience was really good. And the board we have now is great and getting even better.
Well, and you came on the board, I'm not going to say a tumultuous time, but there was a lot going on with Erlanger.
It was, I started in November of 19. And that was right after Mr. Spiegel had left.
Yeah.
And
right before COVID too.
And Dr. Jackson had came on board and he was new in his role. And then COVID hit March of that next year of 20, February, March of 20.
This is unrelated, but related to your career. What did COVID do to the hospital in terms of how you had to do things differently?
Everything was different. I mean, you had all the restrictions of infection control, things that you had to really double down on. Elective surgeries, they prohibited those in most facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And, surgery for most any hospital, whether you're big or small, that's sort of your key financial driver as far as revenue to stay sustainable. And so it just created all kinds of challenges. And then the biggest challenge, I think, is the frontline staff. And luckily, I think what's good about coming up through respiratory therapy is understand what those folks are going through that are out there every day dealing with patients. And then COVID just added 100 times more stress. We lost lots of people during that period of time who said, I can't take this anymore. They saw so many people, especially our COVID unit was our medical intensive care unit, which was the largest unit we have. But there was death all around the institution from COVID, but they saw just a tremendous amount. And they would just say, I can't take it anymore. And we lost a lot of good nurses. A lot have come back, after that, after COVID sort of subsided, but it was really trying. And then on my other job, my real job that I had while I was on the board, working in these small communities, we lost these small communities. We lost a lot of people that worked in the hospital that got sick with COVID, and we lost people on our staff, and it was just a stressful time. But it really I was encouraged that it would make rural hospital a little bit bigger highlight for the federal government, because we were calling and coordinating and working well with the bigger hospitals like the Lower Alabama hospitals,
mm-hmm.
working with Montgomery and Birmingham really well, even Tallahassee to some extent because they're close by in Lower Alabama. So when you were overwhelmed with COVID patients, and these small hospitals don't have the people with the training to take care of a really sick COVID patient like in an intensive care. So you had to find a place to transfer them to, and all these other transfer facilities were full. Wow. And when I was in Alabama, we transferred some people as far away as Mississippi to find a bed. And it was just an unbelievable stressor for healthcare.
And there was no playbook. And
no
you
playbook.
Being the planner, you couldn't plan for all this.
No, you're playing it by ear, literally, almost. So and Erlanger did a great job. When I was on the board, Dr. Sizemore was a key piece of it. But we had some great physician leaders that really helped guide us through that period of time.
So Erlanger's obviously, like everyone else, going through COVID, but Erlanger is also beginning a transition. We're going to be a public hospital. We're going to be a private hospital. You're on the board. Can you walk through that?
Yeah, that was sort of so I guess during the fall and right before COVID, we had already started as a board talking about, we've been in this quasi-governmental structure for almost 50 years, about 45, 60 years, somewhere in that ballpark. And nobody knows what the future of healthcare holds. It sort of changes every few years. It takes big, drastic changes. And we are a disadvantage in Chattanooga because we're in the sunshine as a governmental. Mm-hmm. So our finances were in the paper every quarter. Anything that was discussed at the board meeting was in the paper the next day. It's a real competitive disadvantage. So the big reasons we changed was that we would, number one, be out of the sunshine. We would be able to create a self-perpetuating board where we would pick the skill sets of people that we needed as board members instead of it being politically appointed the way it was. And then number three, we'd be in control of our destiny. We would literally have total control of how we perform and the decisions we make. And so we looked at different models, and really the model it kept coming back to was go to a private, not-for-profit. But it wasn't as simple as just changing governance structures. We had to go to Nashville because we were a designated hospital authority from Nashville, and had to get first off, had to get the legislative approval. And then after they approved it, then we had to come back and go to the county commission of Hamilton County and have them approve it also before we could even take it on. But we were, Vicki, Greg, and I were sort of in charge of that effort. And we spent a lot of time together talking to stakeholders, talking to legislators, going lots of trips to Nashville. And Mayor Carpenter was very engaged, very helpful with us. And we never just talked about it, but we sort of would think it's going to take 2 years to do this. But we got it done in 1 year, and we were just totally enthralled that we got it done the first year we took it over and tried it.
Well, that was going to be my question, is how long it took. A year? That's a quick turnaround.
Yeah, we sort of planned things out through the fall and then started with the legislative delegation, really, telling them why and what it was going to do for Erlanger and what it would do for the community through the legislative session. And then they literally voted for it the last day of the session. Literally. I mean, it was the last day. I remember I got a photo from the floor with the vote. And so it was pretty cool. So then we were on our way. Then that we didn't start. Then we did our due diligence and then converted in July 1st of 2023.
Through all this, you're on the board, and you were telling me a little story earlier, and if you could restate it, that you were asked to leave a board meeting. What was that about?
Yeah. So I was the board chair. So I'd been budget and finance chair for 2 years. And then they asked me to go to the board chair role. And so I'd been board chair maybe 6 months or somewhere right in that ballpark. And this was the June of 23 meeting. And Mr. Germ, John Germ, he's our, at that time they call it Leadership and Development Comp Committee. And basically their job is to hire and fire a CEO and look at compensation to make sure it's equitable across the organization. And we were going through this normal board meeting, and I go through the committee reports. And so I asked Mr. Germ, do you have a report? He said, yes, we do. We would like you to leave the room. And I thought he was sort of kidding, but he was serious. And so, Mr. Germ can be serious when he wants to be. So he was serious. And I could look at him and say, he's not kidding. He wants me to leave the room. So I got up, went outside, and I was outside for 40 minutes probably at least.
Did you know what it was about?
Not really. I just thought, what's going on? And then anyway, stood up there and talked to people in the hallway that were walking by. I guess they were wondering why I was standing out there too.
Yeah.
and so they came and got me, and I went back in, and it was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. I sat back down, and then he said, we've had a long discussion, and we'd like to offer you the position of CEO of the hospital. And I just said, thank you. Give me this on Thursday. So give me over the weekend to think about this. And so that's how that happened.
How does that hit you?
It's a weird feeling. It's almost like, are you dreaming or, what's going on?
Am I hearing what I'm hearing?
But it was, I think the biggest thing, it was an honor. And I don't take that lightly. I've been doing this, and I've told some of the board members, I've been doing this a long time managing hospitals, but Erlanger's a big facility, and going through all the changes we're going through, it's a lot to manage. And I said, this intimidates me some, because of just the challenge. But luckily, being on budget and finance, I sort of knew where the challenges were. And So anyway, talked it over with my boss, and Amy agreed that probably it's the right thing to do. And I said it'd be sort of cool to start my career at Erlanger and then, end my career at Erlanger.
Well, it's almost similar to your brown stove days. You learned every step on the assembly line to where you could put together and take apart a stove. And you've done the same thing with hospitals.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And it's a good analogy.
How long have you been CEO now?
Just finished July 1st was 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah. So I'm on my last year of my current contract.
And not to get into deep details, but if you could talk a little bit about the future of Erlanger and healthcare in Chattanooga.
The future of Erlanger is, I think, really bright. Chattanooga's growing. And so the future of Erlanger, probably later on this fall, probably in a few months, we'll start publicizing some of the strategic moves we'll do. So I won't talk about those a lot right now, but we've got plans that involve mostly east because it's at capacity and it's in the high growth area of eastern Hamilton County. And so we're going to do some work out there. And then downtown, we're going to do also some refresh work and sort of touch up things there and make us a little more presentable. We're sort of attired in some of our areas and spruce up some areas that need it. And we're doing that with some bond money that we pulled down a year. This time last year, we financed about $318 million in bonds and pulled down $150 million of new money that we could put forward toward this next expansion effort to meet the needs of the community. And so we've opened all of our beds. In the last 18 months, we've opened probably a little over 100 beds or right at 100 beds. And so we're full. And so we're trying to add capacity at East to decant, for lack of a better term, elective surgeries to East, and then make downtown really truly the tertiary high acuity hospital teaching for the teaching services. And so that's sort of a high level synopsis. Yeah. And then we're looking at some other strategies that we'll bring out probably late in the year also that we'll communicate when we get them nailed down. But I'm excited about, we've got an engaged management team, probably the best management team I've worked with, and it's a really good group moving us in the right direction. We've had big increases in our patient experience scores, which I've been really working hard with our group on, and everybody's bought into that. We've got good quality scores. We've had good survey scores in the last 2 weeks. So we've got everything going at a really good level, and we're just looking forward to this expansion and to service this community. It's an exciting time at Erlanger.
Yeah, and it sounds like with the change to private, not-for-profit, you've got a little bit more control over being able to direct things of what's important in the future for the hospital and the community. Yeah,
excited. We'll, in a few weeks, be doing the topping out ceremony for Erlanger Park, and that's exciting for us. We were honored that the Lookouts looked at us and gave us an opportunity to work with them because they've got, we were talking about it, they go back to the late 1800s. We go back to the late 1800s, got a lot of deep roots in the community. And I think it's going to be a great partnership there also.
Well, and the old ballpark's just across the street.
I know. It was just right there in the back door.
Yeah, it's good partnership.
Yeah, it is.
Jim, before I get to my last question, I want to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. It's a huge thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, my last question is, what would you tell that 25-year-old? What's important for a happy life?
What's important for a happy life? I think probably just... for me, it's been working hard and doing what you enjoy doing. Whenever I've been at an organization, and luckily that's only happened maybe once in my career, if you get unhappy at that organization and you don't enjoy your work, I didn't whine and complain about things. I just left and found another opportunity.
Make a change.
And just make a change. And I think just always put yourself in a position where you can do your job well, and you enjoy doing it. Enjoy the big things. Enjoy the people you're working with and working for. Who I work for is very important to me. The quality of the people that I work for, and that's what I like so much about I work for the Erlanger board, and we've got a really good board. With Sheila as the chair, and we've got a couple of new really good board members that have just been appointed. It's just continuing to get better and better. So that's important to me. And then the one thing that I always remember, one of my early mentors at Erlanger in respiratory, when I was assistant director, the director was Jim Allen, and Jim would sit and talk over coffee in the mornings, and he always preached, never burn a bridge.
Yeah.
And so I always remembered that, and I always practiced that through my whole career. As he said, healthcare is a small world, and you never burn a bridge, because you never know when you might have to go back across that bridge for some reason, and it makes it a lot easier to do so if you've kept relationships positive.
Well, and your bridge spans your entire career, because you started at Erlanger, and here you are back at Erlanger.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming in and talking today. You got a fascinating story, and I think the future's bright for not just Erlanger, but Chattanooga healthcare.
I agree. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.